So good morning, everybody, and thank you for jumping in here. Like I said, this is not going to be a 2-hour session. I just done in Zoom so that we had a little bit of buffer in case you wanted to contribute or share ideas or ask questions or get clarification as we go through. So look, it was really nice. Like for 2 years, nobody really called me and said, "Hey, I'm having a hard time getting my seller to reduce the price." Strange, huh? What happens in a good market, and then the market starts to normalize or even slow down, and we realized that the numbers we gave them when we met with them to price their property, they really aren't getting a lot of buyer interest in the market right now. And so it's time to go have that less than comfortable conversation with them about reducing the price. And what happens for a lot of us is that we take on some personal responsibility and we're like, oh my gosh, I missed the mark here. I gave them a wrong price. It could be 1,000 variables as to why that house isn't selling at the asking price. But I will say that none of this makes sense if we aren't even in the honest ballpark. Now, in other sessions and training, we've done a lot of discussion about being selective about the seller you decide to work with and reasonableness in their pricing. And, if we're going to price high going to the market to test the market, it's got to be there's a certain strategy to doing that. And so we're going to pick up here as if that strategy didn't work out. So in other words, we're in the ballpark. We're not some ridiculously crazy off price, but for some reason the price isn't landing. And then what do we do from here? And how do we do this in such a way as to preserve the relationship with the seller? Because this can be one of the first moments of actual damage of their trust, is when we mishandle coming to them asking a price reduction. And so I want to again pick up from there, about where we are, where we're going with this. And so our goal here is to try to do two things. One, to get the asking price reduced or improved in such a manner as to be interesting to buyers, and number two, to do so in such a way as to preserve the seller's trust. Those are our two goals here. Now, I think most of you know who I am, so we'll just move on from that. So where we are today is that the prices, even if, let's say 3 months ago, the seller called us and said, "Hey, we need to sell. Here's all the reasons why." We do a good consultation with them. We explain pricing and all that. And they're like, "Okay, cool. We'll list next month. It's a holiday, or I got things going on, or whatever." And right now we are seeing that month make a difference, depending on what the Fed chairs do with an interest rate, or whether we're getting closer to a Christmas or holiday season, or a slowdown or a cold or whatever's going on in the market. Gas prices go up and all those things trigger change. And so, yeah, we could actually have a difference 30, 60 days later by the time it gets in the market and we've tested that price. But we also have a challenging time with using the stats, the comps that we're using in some areas that we're working. There's not enough comps to go back 60 days or 6 months, rather. We're going back 12 months because that's just what we have to do. And there has to be, and again, I have other classes that we've taught here and are recorded if you're new, about pricing the property properly, and how important that is, and how important it is to stay and maintain control with the sellers when you're pricing it. But even if those things fail, and they sometimes do, here is the next step. That seller gets upset. They get upset the house isn't selling, and there's one person to blame, like it or not, whether it's a fair assessment of us or not. They're going to ask you, what can you do to make this more appealing? Just this weekend, I was ghostwriting an email for one of the agents to her sellers, who were adamant about the untrue things they believed. And of course, one of the sellers used to be a real estate agent, because everybody gets a turn apparently in the US. Everybody has to have their license for a little while. And that person literally hasn't been an agent for 30 years. And she was trying to say, well, people need to see the promise of this, the potential of this house. And how many of you have heard your sellers say that? If we could just get the buyers to see the house the way we do. And so what they're saying, in other words, is, why aren't you able to get a buyer interested in my property? And now we have more analytics now than we've ever had ever in the industry. Like, there are so many markers to tell us consumer interest or not in a property. And so when that seller's starting to freak out, we typically get defensive. Like, hey, look, we told you we were pricing at the top of what it could possibly appraise for. We were testing the market. Your house isn't as good as the other 6 houses for sale in the neighborhood. And what we're doing now is putting ourselves at odds at them. Because we feel like they're putting pressure on us, we start to turn around and go, your house isn't as good as you think it is. That conversation should have been had when we priced the property, but now we're going to revisit it when the buyer has some generally unreasonable expectations of the market. And for those of you who have taken my negotiations class, one of my biggest go-tos here is data. That is the easiest negotiation tool. However, we do have, it's a cultural phenomenon that it seems to be developing more and more every day. We have everybody of every side is starting to not believe anything that doesn't align with their pre-existing beliefs. And so if I believe that my house, because Zillow told me my house is worth $800,000, and you come in and say anything less than that, I'm going to believe the data that best supports my pre-existing consideration. And so if you come in lower than that, it's a lot of work uphill to convert them to your way of thinking, and you burn a little bit of that tolerance they have for negotiations right off the bat. And so then it becomes very important to keep them in love with us and the idea of selling the home, because that's what we do, right? We have this toddler approach of, if people don't give me what I want, I'm just not going to play. And so they tend to take their house off the market thinking the market's going to get better. We have some pretty good tools that tell us what the market will look like in 12 months, and better is not on the list of adjectives. So being able to share information and data with them is important to help keep their love, so that the enemy is the market. The enemy is the appraiser. The enemy is that unfair lender who just won't give the buyer more money than the house is actually worth. And so we want to keep their love on our side, not be adversarial to them, because again, we should have preempted the condition of the house and other comparable properties before even going to MLS. So now we're at a stage of keeping their love and keeping the enemy being everybody else. And again, I cannot stress this enough. None of these things work if you were grossly off the mark when you took the listing, right? There's no technique we've ever found that you told that seller, you know what, I think it's worth 700,000, but we'll try 800,000, see what you've lost you lost all these battles there. Now, being slightly off the mark, being a little high, being on the market for too long and adjusting because of the swiftness in which they want to sell, are all tactics we'll talk about here. But the pricing discussion started early on. And so the approach here is, if I'm going to go to Heather and she is going to talk to me about selling her home, when I met with her, I would not have said, Heather, your home is worth $580,000. I would have said your home is worth between 570 and 590,000. At 590,000, we're testing the market. You're going to be in the market longer. Being in the market longer can be detrimental to you. We are seeing if somebody will make an offer and seeing if somebody will appraise at 590. At 580, I think we're in this great safe zone where it is probably still the attention of we'll get the attention of some buyers out there, there may be some interest. 570 is our safer place to be, where we're sure it's going to appraise and we'll get the highest amount of interest from a buyer. Having that discussion, and I'm using $10,000 up and down price range, at 580 it's probably going to be larger than that, right? It's probably going to be 590 to 560 to 540. But you're going to give them some range. And the reason we're doing it is to give Heather the belief and the reality that she is responsible for her own decisions, so that when Heather goes to 590, because you know how Heather is, she's going to do that. When we go to 590 and it doesn't sell, I can come back and go, so Heather, when we talked about pricing, I told you this was where I felt we were safe for both appraisal and for buyer interest. And this is where the max could be in the market. You went to the max. The market is telling us that that's not a number they find acceptable. Can we go ahead and start considering numbers that are closer to where I think we were going to end up in the first place? Now, remember that when I met with Heather and I did my estimated cost sheet, I told her that she gets to choose where we start, but 590 is the maximum possible comps that an appraiser is going to find and utilize. And so she's taking responsibility of taking a gamble and going back to the market. When that doesn't work out, she now has some responsibility for that. Now, because again, she was in control. She had the advice and counsel and responsibility, so that it gives me the right to come back and say, we kind of tested those numbers. I think we need to go back somewhere else. And so there's some mutual um, responsibility there, not just that's the number you gave us, so that's what the number we went with. So again, you're setting yourself up for this success well before we even get on the market. Now, remember also, language matters here and evidence of work. I don't know how, I know I've been saying this since I got licensed, so nearly 20 years now, a couple months will be 20 years. You have to take control of the dialogue with the clients. If you're taking overpriced listings, largely overpriced listings, not testing the water, we're in the safe zone listings, and you just say, I think we could sell at that price. When you say, I think we could sell at the price, you have taken ownership of that number. Same way when you go to meet with them and go, hey, Heather, I understand what Zillow said, but let me show you A1 first. Zillow on their own website says you can't trust their numbers, right? That they're an entertainment site and these numbers are not considered valid. Number two, I'm going to show you the actual data that I'm using. And guys, we're going to do two CMAs in our equation here. The first market analysis is when we take the original listing. You've got to show your work. You've got to use a written CMA. This builds trust in the numbers. This shows evidence of your effort. This is not just some random number you're taking control of. Number two, you're going to come back into a second CMA before we even ask for the price reduction. Now, a big mistake that I see with agents is that, they're talking to Heather now that she's listed the property and she's a month in going, we've only had 2 buyers. They didn't make offers. Their feedback said we were too high. What do you think we should do? And I just text back, I think we should probably consider reducing the price. What do you think? Now, remember, it's also a Matthewism. I understand it. To me, text message is not a business tool. It's a quick message of, hey, I'm at the door, or what's your ETA to show a property. But when you send a text message, you are only communicating 10% of your actual intended message, that written word, and usually abbreviated by the nature of being succinct in text. Number two, it's not trackable, it's not considerable. It's hard to manage later. So I don't like those. Drawing out a long, lengthy email, in today's consumer, they don't read it. They are guaranteed to miss critical details if you're more than 2 paragraphs in length, because they just won't. They will scan it and get tired and bored. It's just the nature of humans. So everybody who says, well, I'm a people person, not a tech person, you can't divorce the two. You have to understand how consumers communicate if you're truly a human or a people person, so that you can understand how they digest information. Picking up the phone and calling them goes from 10% of the message you want to receive being delivered to about 30%, because the words you use and the voice tones have that control. But body language is a critically important thing here. So we're looking at 70% of conveyance of my sincerity and information when I am presenting information to my consumer. And so in other words, if I am texting Heather and Heather says, I don't know, I'm really upset that there's only been 2 buyers. They gave bad feedback about the price. I haven't seen a lot of activity in the house. I'm not going to shoot back a text that says, hey, what do you think about reducing the price? Because that is going to be off-putting to her. It's going to sound like I'm just like, hey, we have to reduce the price. She doesn't see my why, my sincerity, all the rest. This is a good either in-person meeting, coffee shop meeting, or Zoom meeting. And again, I push this a lot. Let's say I have a contract and I'm just sending over an addendum, I'm still going to ask Heather to get on Zoom so I can bring up the document, explain it in real time. She can see and hear and that I'm a human, and that I'm truly interested, not just some quick emails back and forth. So the CMA needed to be explained and all that information received, so that when I go back later and ask for the consideration of the price reduction, I'm going to be showing my work and what has changed between the original CMA and the one I'm doing now, why the market has changed, what impact it's had. If you start off without doing the original CMA and just choosing a random number because Zillow told you to, you lose a lot of leverage when you're coming back 30 and 60 days to say, let's show you what changed, because they don't see a change. There wasn't a demarc. There wasn't a monument in the beginning of data that allowed them to build off it later to see that the market has shifted. So you need the CMA, and you need to make the CMA the bad guy. I understand what I believe your house is great. I think your house is awesome too. I'm glad you think your house is awesome. I don't think the buyer is going to buy the house based on awesomeness. They are going to buy the house based on, is it reasonably priced, as verified by an appraiser, Here's the data that I think most appraiser would use. So keeping data in front of them and doing that CMA is important. And then continuing to act as the trusted guide. So they have to take ownership. Heather needs to be somewhat responsible for the decision or price. This is a partnership. And many of you, if you've ever heard my listing presentation, you will hear over and over again, are we good partners? Would we be good partners when we partner for this? They are adults, presumably, some of them, and they should be taking responsibility for that activity. So I'm going to guide them through there and say, here's the levels. If you don't want to change your price, Heather, that's fine, but understand, without a change, we are going to continue to get further away from your goal of when you want to sell, and maybe even losing some money. We'll talk about how we show your evidence that in a bit. The second thing that you need to have outside of that CMA is that written marketing plan. Again, I'm going to go to Heather. I'm going to promise her I'm this great marketer. I'm going to do all these magical things. 60 days later, the magic isn't working. And that's when Heather goes, hey, I noticed you haven't done any open houses. You're right, because you live out in the middle of God's country and nobody wants to go out there unless they absolutely have to. So they're not just swinging by on a Sunday to do an open house. Now, other homes are appropriate for open houses. You have something on Caroline Street downtown, that's a great place with a properly marketed open house. So you would have a marketing plan that is unique to the consumer. When I met with Heather, part of my marketing plan was part of my listing presentation, and this is what we're sticking to, so that she can't come back and go, well, I don't see the buyer, so what else are you going to do? Can you, I don't know, I don't, whatever crazy thing the seller asked for. No, this was my marketing plan. And the other reason for having this is not only to show, because you have to stay within your budget. Remember, taking this listing was a business decision. You also need to go back and say, I'm going to renew or update. So we're going to have a remarketing market plan if they do a price reduction. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. That marketing plan also sets the expectations for the buyer so that you can come back and say, hey, Heather, it's been 60 days. Let me show you all the stuff I promised you I was going to do in the marketing and show you the efficacy of those that effort on the marketplace. In other words, I can go to, and they can go to Zillow and see how many people have bookmarked it and looked at it. That's good data. That's actually incredibly good data. And they trust it because, remember, in their 18 to 24th month buyer journey, or seller journey rather, before putting a house in the market, they've been watching Zillow like a hawk. It's something like 91% of sellers believe the data on Zillow and follow it for months before listing. So they're going to have that, but there's so much more, especially for CBE agents, that we can show evidence of. Again, this weekend, while working with one of our agents to kind of help her with the approach of the price reduction for her clients, again, being very data driven, it was easy for me to go back and look at, one of those sites we have, back out of the social media site to HomeSpotter. I knew I'd get there in a second, not HomeSnap, HomeSpotter. Get to HomeSpotter and go, hey, look, there's been 422 people who have looked at that listing on Facebook. There's been another 300 that looked on it at Instagram. And what they're telling us, or what this is telling me, dear seller, is that social media marketing that I promised you, that website marketing on my single listing website on Paradigm or Impress or Promote, whatever you're using, that all that data, here are the numbers that are coming back. And in total, between Zillow and all the rest, we've had 12,000 views in the past month. But we've only had 3 buyers, because buyers are looking at comparable properties in the market and they don't see the value. But my marketing's working because you're getting the exposure. The buyer isn't coming to see the property generally because of price. Now, this also means that you need to stay in touch with them from day one. So again, if I'm going to go take a listing and I sit down with the seller, part of my presentation is you will get an update from me on every Thursday morning. Do you want a text? Do you want a phone call? Do you want an email? How do you want this delivered? And I have time blocked every Thursday morning to make sure I get back to any active clients, whether it's, land listing or residential buying or selling, whatever it is. And for some of them, they'll choose, just call me and leave a voicemail, or I want to meet in person by Zoom. Of course, I would never schedule in-person meetings weekly with a seller. That's insanity. Or just a text message or whatever it is. Now also remember, one of the most underutilized tools that you and I have is again this data information where we should be sending month or weekly rather. Here's how many people have viewed it on Realtor.com, on Zillow, on my single listing website, and all of this. And it's a very quick report every week. Even if you have 12 listings, once you know where that data is, you're just filling in the blanks and sending them a little blanket email. And again, I got my little video on email templates. If you don't know how to do that, I will share that with you. But I'm going to be emailing them this template that says how active these things are. That way, when it comes time for price reduction, we didn't just jump from, I only heard from Matthew when he took the listing. I heard from him when there was 2 showings, and now I'm hearing from him saying, let's lower the price, right? They need to see the efficacy of your work. They need to know that you're engaged and you're doing stuff and you're checking in with them. You can't just jump from, I took a listing to we have to reduce the price. There's tons of breakage. You're fighting an uphill battle, and they are always going to be concerned about the lack of work that you're doing. And then remember, data is currency here. This is going to be a negotiation and a renegotiation, right? We negotiated the listing in the first place. We got a certain price point, and that price point isn't working. And now we need to go back to them. So we're going to talk now about a little bit of where you're going to get that data and what data actually matters. The first one is to know what the market's doing. So let me, as you all know, I am a big fan of RPR. And again, I want to be able to show them what we're doing. Does everybody see my website with the RPR up on it? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go look up an address. I'm going to go look up an address here, and I'm going to go down to maps. We're going to just start over here at maps. And when I click to open the interactive map and I zoom out a little bit, I can add data layers. So over here, you see data layers in the map. And when I go look at the 12-month estimated change, you can see that in this particular location where my house is, there's a projection because it's blue that there's probably going to be some type of increase. You can see down here in the bottom right-hand corner, the 12-month change of estimated value. There's going to be either some neutral or some slight increase. But if I go over here to across from Mott's Run to River Road, it's super red, a little bit pink out here, and that is a projection of the decline in market. And so these houses, these waterfront properties over here on Mott's Run are projected to decrease because of the price point is going to be disinterested to most of your high-end buyers. Remember, interest rates are typically impacting more high-end buyers because they're a little bit more financially savvy. And so they're not looking for workforce housing or middle of the ground housing. And so I can look here and say, okay, if you're in the red, if my seller's in the red, then not reducing the price to meet the market is going to be detrimental to them. It's going to cost them more money. And if they go, we'll just take it off the market and try next year, you can easily go to this map and go, you can. But the analytics we have, the economists are telling us that the price is probably going to reduce. This makes the data the enemy and speak for itself, as opposed to just your random opinion, which can be, argued back and forth, because we're really good at arguing people's opinions back and forth. Actually, we're getting good at arguing data, no matter how obvious it is, with the sellers. We can show them all the comps in the world, and we are still finding those sellers are going, yeah, but my house is different. But buyers just need to see the potential, whatever it is. So again, we're seeing buyers getting really good at arguing data, but it's the only real tool we have to make them think and to know at the time. So if I go and sit with them and I deliver my reasons why they should reduce their price, and I show data like this, and they go, no, and they stomp their little tantrum feet, their toddler feet, doesn't mean that 3 or 4 days they're going to buy when they're going, I guess he's right. The news is telling us that the housing market isn't as healthy as it was last year, and whatever else. And so don't get frustrated if they ignore the data at the moment, because it's hurting their little feelings. They're taking this as a personal attack of the quality of their home and their neighborhood and all the other stuff. All right. So that is just one of the tools that you have. Now ignore all this because I was just playing recently on this, but you can also look at the history over here on market trends. And you can adjust for it to show, if you want to do a quick comp, RPR is a fantastic tool for quick CMA, but you can go over and it starts off with what's going on in the market. and kind of gives you the month of inventory and the numbers here to give you projection. And I can just quickly hit create a report here, and it's going to create a nice PDF that we can share with them. And again, if you did not catch it, I did a video recently about how to use Canva to edit RPR, which I think is super, super awesome. But again, I'm a nerd. Let me grab that link there. Hey, buddy, this is Matthew Rathbun, and all right, so you can bookmark that for later. But that is video how you can import this report into Cloud or to Canva to edit it and make your own updated CMA and market trends report with your branding and everything, or you can just send this as part of the packet. But this market trend is going to tell me what's going on with this house specifically. And again, in this case, it's telling me this is actually a pretty good market for this property. We're still slightly in the seller's market. The average days of the market are low for the average price point. And again, you can just kind of scroll down and see what's going on in the neighborhood. This is good data, of course, to give a buyer, but this is going to give you some insight in the seller. And then you can go to just simply under research, doing the neighborhood search report or the residential market activity search, whichever one you prefer. Okay. And this one will help you start to pull information about comps and what's going on and see things, I think, more clearly. I think RPR is easier to utilize than Bright MLS when it comes to this. It just takes a little bit of time to learn how to do it. And there's plenty of free videos about it. And then I can look at the neighborhood search report and get some solid information about what's going on there with 12-month predictions. Also price per square foot and what other new homes have come on the market in a reasonable time frame. So RPR is my place to go and grab that information. And for us at Coldwell Banker, we can go to my buyer locator, the CB buyer locator. This is another report that I like to include when I am going for price reductions. And so I'm going to show them that I know exactly who the buyers are and how they're behaving. It's also going to show us what's called feeder markets, which show us where our buyers are actually coming from. About 2 or 3 months ago, I got a phone call from a seller who wasn't happy with their current listing agent, who happened to be a good agent. I did not pursue the listing. I thought the agent they had was fantastic and probably doing as good or better job than I would. But when she was talking to me, she goes, my problem is our agent is only advertising in Virginia, and they should be advertising all over the world. And I was like, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you know that's true? But anyway, so no one had reviewed with the seller really days in the market or behavior. And so going back and showing this profile to the buyer to say, hey, or the seller rather, to say, hey, look, we know exactly how old, how they engage and all the rest, builds the case that we're keeping an eye on the consumer and that we know we're marketing the right place. Again, reinforcing the value we've already instilled before we even asked for the price reduction. So those reports, that data should all be included in what I'm presenting to the seller when I'm going after this. And again, I'm taking a little time to explain it to you so you get it, but it's 2 minutes. You go click a button and you pull the report. And now you put it in the packet to go back to them and say, hey, I think it's time we reevaluate our price. Let me show you what's going on in the market. Let me show you some third-party data from economists and AR, and go from there. And then we're going to go update the CMA. Again, we're going to share why the numbers we pulled when we originally talked to them are no longer valid, assuming that they aren't. And especially if you can do a quick CMA where you can show progressive price reductions by competing listings. We, as a consumer base in the US, will follow other trends. So if you can show that seller that they're not the only ones who've had to do a price reduction in the past 6 months to a year, they are more likely to feel okay with it. They just just don't want to be the only one admitting that they didn't price their home well, or that the house is overpriced. And then we're going to look at buyer feedback. Now, remember, if you're brand new, surprise, not a lot of buyer agents give feedback, right? If you've been doing this for a while, you know, we've set it up on auto through showing time or whatever. It sends out a couple emails. We try to get the feedback. If you get it, you must share it with your clients. It's constructive notice of, and it's material, and it's all this other stuff. So when I get feedback, I forward it to my sellers, but then I also keep it easily in a folder. So when it comes to price reduction, that's part of the report I'm bringing to that seller. My updated CMA, the market conditions report, and any feedback we've gotten, so they can be reminded of it and see it real time. And they often will dismiss it. Like those buyers are just looking for a deal, and you know, those buyers, I don't know what they're doing, what they're thinking, but it doesn't matter. Let the seller ramble. They're mad at the market. And remember, I mean, think about it this way: when you go to that seller and go, "Hey, look, kind of missed the mark, I think we need to reduce the house," you should not go to them for nickel and dime reductions, because every time you go and ask for a reduction, it's a whole new battle and a whole new breakage of trust. So if I'm going to go and ask for the price reduction, I'm not asking for $10,000 off of 580,000. I'm asking for 20,000. Now think about this. You're asking them to reduce 20 or 30,000. That's a salary for somebody, you know, for the year. I mean, that's a lot of money. We're just trying to get it sold, and it's a huge amount of money to them. They've already mentally spent that money when they put the house in the market. And so you have to be cognizant of that and start showing them this data, including the hard truths that are coming from the feedback from the buyer agents and buyers. Now, a couple of things that they're going to be keying in on is days on the market. They want to make sure you're not reducing their price when they're on the market for 15 days and everybody else is on for 3 months. What new listings have come on the market, what price reductions comparable listings have already done. You've got to point that out. I personally have found that's one of the biggest moments where you can see, if you're read body language, you will see that seller who may have been tense. You can see their shoulders are about half an inch higher than they were. And when they see that other people are reducing, they start to relax. It happens every time. Saying, "Hey, you're not the only one, this is impacting everybody," tends to improve your chances of a reduction. We're going to look at the 12-month prediction, what it looks like 12 months from now, which again, when I showed you an RPR how to get, and some recently sold properties. And one of the other things that will help you is that they see that 2 neighbors went on the market but did not sell at all and are off the market. That is a cautionary tale that you can go back to the sellers and say, "Hey, look, your neighbors down the street, they just gave up on the market and came off the market." That does help us some by fewer comps, assuming there's fewer comps, but it also tells us that their prices were too high as well. And we based our price off of past sales and competing competition. Those things are changing. Here's our new competition. Here's the new generation of listings since we took your listing and priced the property. So again, days in the market need to be talked about. Any new listings that come on since you listed the property, any reductions by those competing listings, what the next 12 months look like, and what has sold recently that may impact them. And then we're going to get all this together into a singular report. So we want the updated market analysis, the feedback report, and the lockbox history as well. Remember, you may get 25 or 30% of the feedback you request from buyer agents, but everybody who didn't write an offer was also giving feedback. They did not see the value of it. They saw the value enough of it in your marketing to get to the property, but once there, it did not instill the desire to write an offer. That's feedback. And so going to that seller and saying, "Look, you've had 27 showings. We had 3 pieces of feedback. All 3 of those pieces of feedback said they liked the house, but they felt the price was too high." Unless it doesn't, and then you move on. All the people who didn't make an offer were telling you the price was too high, because people will buy when they see value. And so so we want to have that lockbox history. And again, you can go pull that report in the central lock and add it to the group. You want market statistics. Again, even if it looks the same as it did 3 months ago when you first priced the property, you still just want to engage them in market statistics, making that the enemy, you know, what's going on in the market, not you. And then lastly is a summary of the marketing efforts. And when I say summary of the marketing efforts, what I mean is to say, we're on Zillow, we're on Realtor, we're on homes.com, we're on coldwellbanker.com, we're on HomeSpotter, and we did this, and if we did open house, we did this. What do those numbers look like? Not just all the places, the ubiquity of your marketing isn't important as the efficacy of your marketing. And so to go back and take a quick screenshot of Zillow and say, look, there was 24,000 views, there were 16 saves, we had 22 people come see the property. They didn't make an offer, right? It's the price at this point. I'm doing my job marketing the property. And those numbers can be staggering. I mean, if you go look at HomeSpotter, that 1 week campaign, we're seeing people get a few hundred to 1,000 hits. And that's people, when you look at HomeSpotter report, when you go pull the HomeSpotter report, those hits, the people they're saying, you saw 472 views. They clicked the link knowing that they're getting their data up to Facebook, right? They took action on those things. And oh, by the way, exporting that list and putting them in your neighborhood news and all the rest is a really good tactic that you should be doing like weekly. But anyways, so that's the information I'm going to gather in my new little report. Now, when I go to them, there's got to be something in return. Hey, we're asking you to reduce $20,000. Here's what I'm going to do if you do that. We are going to, whatever your remarketing plan is, but it needs to also be in writing. You need to compare it to what you've already done and show what new things you're willing to do now if they reduce their price. So of course we're going to, and don't the banality of the job sometimes we take for granted. So when we say we're going to get your house marketed, we're not telling them how many websites it's being distributed to, which is literally thousands. We're not telling them we're going to go in and update the listing and do a few things. So here's a couple of things that I suggest. The MLS update is not solely the price. Shake up the listing description a little bit just to make it look a little fresh. Move some photos around. I know a lot of you have those glamour shot listing photos with the sun setting and the pink sky, and those are beautiful. When you go to the price reduction, you need to switch the photo deck so that you're re-triggering a visual cue to those people who are scrolling, looking at new houses, right? We tried the hyper exposed pink sky look, which by the way, we're hearing more and more from buyers and surveys that they're really kind of sick of that. That's that catfishing type photo, but it is what it is. So people are still using them. Reshuffling the deck, putting a new angle on the property, just to trigger those visual cues is important. We are going to go back to all the agents who showed the property in the past and email to all of them that there's been a price improvement. And I think, again, you need to spend some focused time with your seller using the right vernacular. This is a price improvement, and that's how we're positioning it. And we're going to let other people know about it. Then we're going to go back and tell them we will restart our social media campaign. Remember, whether it's Moxie Promote or HomeSpotter that you're using, it's $99 to run another 1 week campaign. You just go and log in and hit the button to remarket it. That campaign, if you put your seller's email address in HomeSpotter, that campaign follows your seller. So for a week, they're going to see that listing follow them on their social media and online sites with the new price, so that they're reminded that you have done something, right? That there's more exposure going on social media. We're going to you can offer the targeted social media campaign. This is why I suggest going and pulling that My CB Desk report, the CBX report, to say, hey, look, we are targeting this. That report says that the most likely buyer for your home is 38 years old. This is how they consume stuff. We're going to go all in and maybe do a YouTube video or whatever it is extra you're going to add, and make sure you're tying it to the consumer persona that is outlined in there, so they know that you're directly going after buyers who now qualify or may qualify for that price point. And then again, change the primary listing photos just to change the visual cue. Those are a few suggestions. I know there are some agents who do withdrawal and relist the property. That used to be a no-no in MRIS. For some reason, Bright MLS allows it, but it doesn't do any good to remove and relist if you're using all the same visuals and the same listing description. If you're going to do that, you need to use a whole new stack of photos, a whole new angle in the front of that photo, maybe focusing on something better. If they have an indoor pool, that's the primary photo. Remember that the Bright MLS rules state that only you do not have to use the front of the house as your primary photo, but it's got to be in the slide deck. So you maybe some other unique feature or some cool thing in the house that you make the primary listing photo to re-trigger these consumers who have been, doom scrolling through Zillow for months. And again, the market condition reports are RPR. And I'm also going to share and have available. So I usually don't do this in the price improvement stage unless I'm getting a lot of pushback from the sellers. And so the NAR report, I think I've shared this with so many times, you probably have it, but there's a couple of new folks. So I'm going to share this again. The remodeling impact report from NAR breaks down the joy score for buyers of certain features of the home. And so when your seller says, but we just upgraded our kitchen, your response can be, well, let's go see what the impact is in the impact report, the buyer's interest in that. But you also need to have, again, the backbone to speak to your seller's truth. And that truth is you upgrading your kitchen brought it to the price point that we are now. You're not going to see not always you can see a huge ROI on that. The other report to look at is the remodeling impact report, which is a non-NAR report I find very valuable to have. I save these as PDFs on my iPad so I can quickly pull them up when I'm in discussions with the seller. And I can go through those lists when they say, well, we did this upgrade, we did that one, and you can show them a third-party report showing the ROI compared to the thing. This is a granular level negotiations or renegotiation with them that I would not do unless I could not move them from the price point, where I have to now start saying those improvements don't carry the market value of your investment to get them there. That new roof simply made the house sellable, whereas the old roof would have made it, we would have to reduce the price, or we would have had to, narrow down our buyers. But that's good information to have at hand in case you need to. And then we're going to take that data and do one of two things. We're either going to go to MoxieWorks and do a updated presentation, like a listing presentation. I have in Canva is where I'm doing mine now, and then importing it through PowerPoint to MoxieWorks. So I have it in that platform with all the CMA stuff. But I've got two saved presentations. One is my listing presentation. It has the full on everything. And then the new presentation is much shorter. It's only 4 or 5 slides where we review the importance of proper pricing. And then we look at comps and comparable houses. And then I add these other assets we did in the earlier slide. You can condense another one in PDF, whatever. As I mentioned at the beginning, asking for the price reduction is not a text or an email task. It is either in person or by video. In person means they have to put kids to bed, they have to get dinner on the table, they have to make arrangements for you, they have to clean the house, they have to do all this stuff, or they can swing by the office or coffee shop or something. But it means everybody has to spend 3 times more time invested in this meeting than if you just said, hey, can you jump on at 7:30 on Zoom? We'll go through this in 30, 40 minutes to talk about these things. Now it reduces their time and their stress and gives less division to their attention. How many of you have tried to go to the seller's house to do price reductions and their kids are running around crazy? You don't have their attention. And so they're hearing half the information, and what they're hearing is Matthew wants to reduce the price, not all the rationale, the why that would be delivered elsewhere. So again, we're going to put together a CMA. So remember, we're trying to keep their trust. So with some visual aids are going to help outline this data you've collected, that screenshot of the next 12 months from RPR, the feedback summarized or whatever it is, can be either PDF or a slide deck, but you want to take them back through some promises, where we were, this is going to help, and here's what I'm going to do in return. That should all be in writing so they feel like there's some exchange for the price reduction. And I do want to just say that it's not uncommon for us to get into negotiations with them. Even if we lay out all the truth, they don't like it. They've already spent that money in their mind. Now they got to give up whatever they were spending the money on before. There's a much bigger sense of loss than just reducing the price. Even if they just shrug it off and go, okay, you're the expert, in the back of their mind, they're trading some stuff off. So the venue for the discussions, again, in person or by video, not by text, not by email, and even phone, breaks down some stuff, right? It doesn't let you kind of unpack things. You're not seeing things in real time. From a productivity standpoint, getting on the phone and going, so hey, Latana, I'm on page 3. Let me know when you're there. Do you see 3 paragraphs down? That's such a wasted amount of time, and it makes my brain have to burn more calories. Remember, not joking, the more calories I have to burn to get to a decision, the more pissed off I am about the decision I had to get to, because you made me work for it. Now, if you put that on Zoom or in person and you bring it up and point directly to it and highlight it, I'm not burning as many brain calories. It's keeping me in a better state of mind. I'm less frustrated. The visual aids help with all of this. And then we're going to talk about some objections. One of the objections, the first objection you're going to get is, well, I don't see your marketing everywhere. Okay. But I'm the expert in this. Hopefully you've instilled that in them. Here's the marketing efforts I'm doing. Where else do you think I should be marketing? Now, what is their question going to be? It's going to be, well, I'd like to see more open houses. So-and-so down the street had this dollhouse tour through some system with 3D cameras. Those may not be things you're doing. As opposed to, but asking them, where else do you think I should be marketing, is going to open up a whole lot of criticisms, as opposed to say, as a marketing expert, we have executed on these promises. Let me show you all the stuff I'm doing. If you have been providing them updates every Thursday and sending them samples of your work, all of you get from your ASCs an email with the single listing website and all of that stuff you should be sharing with that seller in the early stages, and then every Thursday repeating, hey, we've done a social media push, or, we have tinkered with the photos, or we've done whatever, so that they know. And when they come back and say you're not doing enough marketing, this is when you point back to those numbers. Again, don't come unprepared for this. Go back and go, look, we had 12,822 views on Zillow. We had X number of views on Realtor, on house.com, on my single listing website, on HomeSpotter. Just those 4 or 5 things are probably going to be literally tens of thousands of views after a 90-day period, even in a slow market. I'm marketing. There's exposure. These are people getting this data. We haven't been in the market for very long. Well, go back to your days in the market. The average days in the market are 72 days, and we're at 68, and we've had 2 showings. We're reaching a point where we are on the market longer, and that's going to hurt folks. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier, for those of you who are new, when you're talking to that seller and they are going with a price that's in the high end. So again, I gave the model of, that I think probably 560 is a comfortable area, but I'll go as high as 590 for them. I'm also asking them at the time of listing, hey, if in 30 days we don't sell, can we automatically reduce? Right. And so if I got that agreement during the initial listing phase, I don't go back to them and say, hey, by the way, it's still okay. I'm just going to say, per our contract, per listing agreement, I went ahead and automatically reduced the offer or asking price in MLS based on our prior conversation when we took the listing. If you don't have that built in or baked into your listing agreement, then we're going to go back and say, we've been in the market for 30 days. That's generally where you see your most market and traffic. We haven't seen a lot of it. Understand that the average days in the market is 72, so we're still not there. And I think that's important too, to remind your sellers about the days on the market is with the average. The average means there's 50%, well, the median anyways, 50% of people sold quicker, but 50% of the people sold longer. And so if you see an average of 60 days, that means somebody is selling at 120 days or whatever. That makes sense to everybody? Like, that seller needs to know that that's not the shortest time frame, that is the average time frame. But again, you're going to know what the market is doing. And we know that the market right now in most of Planning District 16 is declining month over month. In other words, the prices are lowering month over month. And so every month they're on the market is some type of price decrease, depending on price point. The next one you're going to hear very common is, if I lower the price, will you reduce your commission? If you, before you get to this phase, if you have shown them your new remarketing campaign, it's a very easy position to say, hey, seller, I actually have to redo all the marketing and all the work I did in the first place. I don't want to get paid less when I actually have to do more work to remarket, re-advertise, and at my own pocket, because these campaigns, they don't need to know that campaign is only $99 for the social media campaign. They do need to know that it's a paid campaign. This is not just passive marketing. We're just putting MLS. We're doing stuff, and it costs money to do stuff. And that has generally been my my comeback when they ask about, if we lower the price, can you reduce your commission? No, I can. I'm actually going to be doing more work by remarketing in your property. And I budgeted, when I took your listing as a business person, for a certain amount of income to investment. and I am exceeding my proposed investment, which means I am getting less income already. So no, I'm sorry, I can't reduce my commission. To date, I have not had a single seller refuse a price reduction because I wouldn't reduce my commission. But I have that data there, and I have that comeback of I got to do more work. And the longer you're on the market, the more work I have to do. The remarketing costs more money. Therefore, I'm already losing the money that I'm invested in this as well. So that tends to put to the side, but you need to know, you need to be confident in that and not hem and haw around it. All of this depends on your confidence level. If you're like, I don't know, I guess we can just try reducing the price. That does not instill confidence. That looks like you don't know what's going on in the market. Having all this other data, these other 4 or 5 pieces of truth here, means we can deliver to that consumer this truth with our recommendation to match the truth to the price reduction. And again, you can't be shy about it. We need to have an engaging conversation with them. This should be planned out. This should be thought out well. Do not half-handedly just test the water by sending a text or just dropping a mention of going, hey, so, maybe we'll have to reduce the price. That lack of confidence is going to kill you. So don't be afraid of your seller either, because look, if you carry this house, the longer you carry this house without making price improvements, the more angry and less likely they are to refer to you in the future anyways. Tackling this problem head on, being confident, having a backbone when you're addressing these problems and concerns, and then asking for the reduction in a systemized professional manner helps to instill the confidence they have in you. They don't question as much what your motives are. You just want a quick sell. I mean, how many of you have heard a seller say that when you've given a price, or at least hint at it? It's not a quick sell. If we've been in the market 60 days and a 72-day DOM, it's not a quick sell. And we tried your price. There's no sale to be had here without a price improvement. And I also remind them, whether it's good or bad, that most buyer agents are not recommending lower than asking prices to their sellers. And I think this is also going to be important data you need to have. You can go pull it from RPR, you can go pull it from Bright MLS, but it'll show you that on average, we are getting 98% of asking price across the board. And so when you have that seller who goes, I know we're priced high, but the buyers can offer less if they want to. We need to remind our sellers that the American culture are not negotiators. We don't inherently do it. It's against our nature. We're not comfortable doing it. And people are so controversy worn right now that people don't want to fight for anything. I mean, how many of you have seen your buyers? They don't even want to participate in multiple offers anymore. I mean, they were getting fatigued with that back in COVID. We're just done fighting all the time as a community. And we're seeing less and less negotiations. And so the seller needs to be reminded that when we see in a market where we're getting 97 to 98% of asking price, that there's plenty of data to back up the fact the buyers aren't even trying. They just don't want to. And the seller needs to be reminded that they may be an aggressive negotiator and they may want to offer less than asking. That's not the norm. And we're alienating a whole bunch of buyers by not showing a reasonable a price for them to even start at a place of consideration. So, and then lastly, once we get them to commit to this price reduction, it needs to be in writing, just as a reminder. The policy of Bright MLS, they don't ask for copies of your reductions and all your other forms. But if you get an email from a client that says, hey, go ahead and reduce the price by $20,000, technically that's probably enough to cover us should we be audited. But the much higher protection is on the price reduction form that Bright MLS has in our library, in our standard forms library. It covers you, it covers them, it's their signature. It's much less challenging to debate than if you just reduce it by email. But at a minimum, you're going to want an email. But you really should be getting onto that price reduction form. There was something else I wanted to say about what it was. So anyway, so that's a little bit about the process to get it sold. Now, again, very data driven. But I want to talk before we wrap up here and I open up the questions. We want to start with the position of gathering all that data. But do remember that your consumers generally come in pairs, they're partners. One of them may be more emotionally driven than data driven, and vice versa. Very rarely do you have two of the same people when it comes to making these types of decisions. And so what I want to do is make sure I'm approaching this in a very human way, and then having the data there to review at some other point. So we have to take them through a slight history lesson, like, hey, here's where we've been. You've been working hard, getting your home cleaned up, getting it set up. I know that you have already planned on spending some of that equity that you have. Let me take you back to our estimated cost sheet. Let me take you back to the CMA. I want to kind of review where we are. Let's look at the market and be truly, and this is why I don't like doing this just by phone or text or email. They need to see in your face and in your expressions that you get them. You're on their side, that you're not the enemy, the data is, that the buyer isn't seeing it. There's new options coming on. The interest rate increases means less buying power and they're going to lower priced homes, whatever. But they need to see and hear that you are on their side and answer all their questions. Get all that stuff out of the way, and then go in and go, all right, let me systematically show you the number of showings, how many offers we've had, the feedback we've had, the number of inquiries and hits on all these other marketing platforms. All this data is taking us down a pretty clear path that the house may not be aggressively priced anymore. We're trying to cater to an emerging group of buyers. They're at lower price points, less buying power, and they still love your home. They just can't afford it, or they're concerned about the next 12 months. As we've seen here, seen your number, you should be concerned about the next 12 months. I'm giving you advice. You have to make the decision. My advice is you're going to get the maximum amount for your house right now, as opposed to the next 2 years, according to these trend reports. And the market is telling us that the buyers are just not interested in the asking price we have. Right now, this whole conversation and dialogue with them, your part of talking is probably 15 minutes, because you're going to have all this data to go through. But honestly, you're going to flip through and show them numbers real quick. And then it's going to be listening to them, their concerns, their needs, and addressing each one of those. I gave you a few counterpoints to the most common objections, but honestly, we get a lot further the more we're quiet about it. So when you show them all that data, the end result should be, so you obviously know where I think this data is going. Where do you think this data is telling us to go? Let them come to conclusion. If they start off with, well, we don't think the price is probably as appropriate as it should be, those are their words, not yours. Now we've again positioned ourselves as the guide to go, okay, let's talk about the next steps to get it where it needs to be, and what I'll promise to do in return to promote that number, that decision that you've made. So that's it. That's our approach. Again, it takes an hour to talk about. It takes about 15 minutes to prepare and 15 minutes to deliver with the clients. So I want to just stop there and ask if anybody has any questions, follow up, or any techniques you're using that you find particularly valuable that we didn't talk about.
This was very helpful, Matthew. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. LaDana?
I would follow up with the fact that you really need that form, because it goes to the admins as well, and your managers. And so it gets changed in Coldwell Banker and Coldwell Banker Elite websites a little bit faster, and rather than it being pulled from Bright.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I will say that change form, by the way, does not have to be signed by the broker in order for you to take action on it. So in other words, if it's a Sunday and they're like, or Friday night rather, and they say, we want to get the price change before the weekend starts, you are able to make the price change once they've signed the form or given you the written instructions to do so. We as brokers are simply signing it to acknowledge it. Now, if you're changing commissions, the broker needs to sign it, because you're changing material aspects of our listing arrangements with them. But nobody, I mean, that's a technical thing. Nobody at CBE is going to say, they ask some questions about why you're reducing your commission. I certainly will have some questions about what you could have done to avoid it, what we need to coach you through to protect your financial interests as a business person. But, we're not going to reject it unless you're doing something ridiculous, like, some ridiculous number. So, but anyways, I just say that so that you don't have to fret about getting a digital signature in front of a managing broker on a Friday night, so you can be competitive during the weekend. Just make the change. Anybody else? No?
How big of a range do you give them as far as a percentage?
Yeah, it really depends on the property, and I'm very sincere about it when I talk to them. Like I literally will never give them a number, a high number that I don't think it'll at least appraise for. But the higher the price point, the broader the range. So if it's anything over, say, 400, I'm probably doing chunks of 20,000, because these little $5,000 things, we've plenty of evidence it doesn't move the needle. We don't see an increased interest, buyer interest, or anything else. I will say this. One of the things that we have seen over the past year, I was just at NAR and they were talking about like the data-driven decisions and things. Offering concessions to buyers as opposed to a price reduction does tend to move the needle, but just a price reduction in moderate or small amounts does absolutely nothing for it. And again, for you and your seller, that means you have to go back to that well again, do the whole ask again for a price reduction, which just deteriorates your relationship and potential for referrals and for them to be your client in the future. So yeah, anything over about 400, 450, I would not bother asking for a price reduction if it was less than 20,000. Under 450, 10,000 increments, I think, again, because you're proportionally looking at a lot of money. When you're talking about, now I'm losing 5% of equity, 5% of equity loss at 200,000 versus 500,000 is very different. So that's just my rule of thumb. I don't have any science for why 400 or 450 is my number. It's just worked for me.
I was referring to the first CMA as far as that pricing.
Yeah, right. So if they're at 480, I may say, if I think 480 is the strong number where I know we're going to get buyers, I know it's going to appraise, I may give them 600 to 540, right? It may be, again, 80s, 60, not 540, 560. Doing math my feet, not my strong suit, or math at all, not my strong suit. This is why Kevin does not let me in finance very often. I make all of them dumber just by walking in the room. Anyway, so if it's a 580, I think 560 to 600 may be the range. And I know that's a massive range, but again, look at the price point. When you're getting up to 600,000, 20,000 up or down is nothing as a percentage of equity than the lower numbers. But yeah.
Matthew, how would you handle a seller that is agreeable to doing the price reduction, but they're adamant at that point about not repairing anything, or saying like, oh, I can't afford to do any repairs, or, I want to sell it as is now?
So they want to make a trade-off. They're pre-negotiating. I will reduce my price, but I'm not going to make any repairs. Is that what you're asking? I'm pretty sure that's what you're asking.
Yes.
Yeah. So my reminder to them is twofold. One, repairs are very often not to upgrade things, but rather to bring them to a sellable price point. So routine maintenance, the house, the roof is aging, that kind of stuff. They run the risk of making that they're pre-negotiating with the buyer before the buyer's even in the house to say, I'm going to reduce my price to a fair market value, which is all we're asking for, not below market. And in return, I'm not making repairs. Well, then that's going to impact the value of the home. And so what the seller is, again, look at using critical thinking skills, think about what's the end result of this decision. What's going to happen is the buyer's going to come make an offer. And if they are going to have to forego a home inspection, they are likely to offer less money. So you're losing money. They don't want to take the risk of an as-is home and pay a premium for it. If you allow them to come make the offer and they do the home inspection, remember right now we have the two options, right? Home inspection without the right to void, or negotiate rather, and the right to void, or home inspection with just right to void. What are they doing? Even if they say we're not going to negotiate, they go, well, Brittany, sorry, my buyers are terminating because of the bathroom sink leaking, so we're out. And then what is your seller going to go? And don't let them leave over a $50 repair, right? They're negotiating directly or indirectly. So I'm going to have that conversation with the seller. If you are losing money by saying as is up front, there's no reason to advertise this. When we get to home inspection, let's look at the list then. If you feel like you have sold under the market value and they're asking for unreasonable things, you have the right to say no and the house goes back in the market. But you've paid another mortgage payment for this to sustain, and the market continues to decline in the winter months of the buyer. So they need to know what the consequences of those decisions are. But I would certainly suggest that unless the house is damn near a turn down and VA and FHA won't apply, I would never put up front, this is an as-is sale. I want the seller to realize they have options to say no to those repairs after ratification. The risk to them is being off the market for a month while we go through that process. They have to take the risk and accept it.
Thank you.
I know I answered some questions. I think one of them was the one you asked, but
Yeah, no, you did. Yeah, it's good.
all right.
I think you brought up another little nugget in there during like 08, 09, and then I think we're going to start seeing it again. Sometimes those houses are sitting vacant and you've got those bullheaded sellers that are just like, well, I'll let it sit. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not going to, you know, lower my price. I've done the math for them and added up those mortgage payments. And sometimes that number kind of drives it home of, you know, I'm financially better off by reducing my price than to, you know, continue to pay this mortgage like this.
That's exactly right. I mean, and that's the question. Like, hey, let's say they have a what, $275,000 mortgage. They're paying $1,800 a month. You know, let's take the offer. Let's let them do a home inspection. If you don't like it and it's ridiculous, you can say no. But if we don't do this, then you're going to be on the market for 2 more months. That's $3,600. They were going to ask for a $500 repair, and you said no because of $3,600 a mortgage. I mean, now there's also, all of you should be going in that listing going, I know how much my expense is going to be, what my participated ROI is going to be, or anticipated rather ROI is going to be. And you should know that when they reduce their price, that is also reducing. I meant to say this earlier, when they ask about reducing commission, your reduction in price is already reducing my income, right? I'm already taking a hit by suggesting reducing the price. I'm already sharing in the damage. All right. Anybody else? All right, guys, thanks for your attention. There's a couple of resources in here for you to look at, and I will send this the recorded version of this out later on this week if you want to review it. No other questions. Thanks so much. Good luck, guys. Have a great day. Merry
Thank
Christmas if I
you.
don't see you beforehand.
Thank you.